And don't underestimate the difference everyone makes in the hallway, in the cleaning, because you make a huge difference. And I think what happens is if we get into this, some jobs are more important than others, we're defeating the purpose, because I think everybody does noble work and everybody can make a difference. And you never want to underestimate the differences someone makes.
Welcome to the Cleaning Up Podcast, Millionaire Secrets of the Home Services Industry, brought to you by me, Ron Holt, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, America's fastest growing cleaning company. I get a chance to sit down with home service industry pros and other entrepreneurial leaders so they can share their stories, their insight, their experiences. It's so much fun. You're going to learn so much, and you're going to be inspired to take your small business into a national brand just like I did. All right, guys, welcome back to another exciting episode of Cleaning Up, Millionaire Secrets Inside the Home Services Industry. Of course, I'm Ron, CEO and founder of Two Maids and a Mop, just this little old cleaning company that started in Pensacola, Florida 18 years ago, that's now grown into a large enterprise with 87 locations across the country. And one of the things I love about what I do is I get to connect with other people across the industry, sometimes home services, sometimes outside of that world. And today is one of those people. Our guest today is Quint Studer. Quint is, a legend in my old hometown of Pensacola, Florida, mainly because he used decades of experience in the healthcare industry to become president of a local hospital there. And then he just did nothing but turn that business upside down and just really improve everything from the internal metrics to some of the results related performance measures as well. He went on to eventually create his own consulting group that worked with healthcare and education industries. And he's also been the great author of a couple different books, one that I've had the pleasure to read most recently called The Busy Leader's Handbook. And then on top of all that, that should be enough, he's also went on to become the owner of the local minor league team in Pensacola, the Pensacola Wahoos. And he's doing all of that while really focusing on the customer experience, just like he did the patient experience when he was in the healthcare industry. So Quint, it is a true honor to have you on our podcast today.
I have a lot of great respect for you. My wife and daughter own a small little boutique hotel. And on Sundays, I'm on the cleaning crew. And I want you to know, I'm quite the good steamer.
Is that right?
Yeah, I steam the floors in the morning, and then I'm in charge of bathrooms. So if anybody's looking, the people are all looking for talent now. So if any of your franchisees are looking for somebody who can come in and do bathrooms, I'm their guy.
Well, that's secret number one to becoming a successful entrepreneur. Sometimes you have to get your hands dirty.
I think that's a real key. I think that's a key for any small business or any entrepreneur, and keeping your hand in it. Because, Larry Bossidy always said in his book, Execution, there's two things you don't want to get away from. And one of them is selecting talent. And the other thing is developing talent. And by getting close to it, you really sort of get to see what it looks like from the customer perspective. And that's really the key to almost any success. Is you're not successful if you don't have happy customers.
Absolutely. So going back to the old days at Two Maids and a Mop, when I did have my hands in everything, I was literally cleaning homes in those early days. As I was building that brand into what we would eventually become today, in the Pensacola area, it was really difficult to not know your name. You were all over the place, and not just because you had a great PR company, but because your work produced results, and you became a local legend there, and went on to become an industry legend as well. And what attracted me to your story, even back in those days, it's the same thing that attracts me to it today, is two words that you use often, is patient experience. And whether it's a hospital or a baseball game, you can interchange those words any way you'd like. But the patient experience / the customer experience is something that you focused on for a very, very long time, and it's worked out pretty well for you. Well, this is a pretty general question, but why is patient experience important in healthcare? Why is it not more about the healthcare and the medical treatment that's provided there?
Well, I think it is, but you have to look at what people can measure. And I can't measure maybe what's going on, the clinical aspect of it. You would hope that it's good clinical care. You've got some great providers in Birmingham that I'm very close with, but they do know things like, was my pain managed? That's the number one thing. Was my pain managed? Two, do I have access to the care? Because people want access. Number three, do I understand who's taking care of me? Do I know the medication I'm on? Do they know what I'm supposed to do when I leave? So I just think those are just really vital things, no different than any other business. Do you understand the expectations? And, I've seen great customer service in many, many places. And, it's interesting too. And I know we're not here to talk about the medical field, but, the greatest doctors are also have the greatest patient experience. And it sort of goes hand in hand, because that patient, when they trust the caregiver, just becomes a better patient. Their anxiety is lower and their compliance is higher. And that's really what you're searching for is, how do you lower anxiety and how do you increase compliance? And if you do those two things, you're probably going to do quite well. And the other thing is it's really word of mouth. I built my own company and never spent any money on marketing. It was really word of mouth. Same thing in when I was president of Baptist Hospital. You create that buzz because it's word of mouth. And I think so who gives you word of mouth? It's either going to be your employees or your customers. So if you have both of them really, really happy, you're getting two words of mouth. And that's really what you need to grow any company.
Yep. And one of the things that also I think is really important to talk about, we've talked about customer experience a lot on the show. And every single time we do that, we always have to start with one other thing before we ever even get to the customer side. And of course, that's the employee side. And I know in your book, and I know a lot about your life and what you've done in different areas, employee experience is really the thing that you focus on the most, because the reality is the better the experience there, then obviously the better experience for the customer. What are some of the things that we can do, that any entrepreneur can do, no matter what industry they're in, to optimize that employee experience and eventually employee performance?
Well, thanks, Ron. And I appreciate you asking that, because I think that's one of the missing things, particularly in small businesses. Now, you're fortunate because, if you read the book E-Myth Revisited, franchise operations outperform non-franchise operations. And one of the reasons is, I think, the training and development. And I think when you look at most people in management, they went into management because they were good at their product. They were good at doing what they did. If were good at cleaning or good at cooking or good at ticketing, when I look at the Wahoos, but then they become a supervisor. Well, it's a whole different job. And I think the key thing is, one, make sure you take some time to select your talent. And I think what happens is we just sometimes rush into hiring or rush into promoting. So I think number one is make sure you really are sensitive about who you hire and who you promote in those positions. The second thing I think is you have to invest in training. And when I look at companies, they just don't invest in training. I'm doing a program tomorrow and with some people in Louisiana, and small company. And, you just gotta invest. You can't assume people know how to hire, or people know how to get feedback, or people know how to do supply chain management or inventory. I was on the curriculum committee at the Harvard Business School, and we really focused in on what are the foundational skills that a leader needs. So I think you've got to make sure that you provide training. The third point, I think you've got to measure. And again, small companies sometimes don't measure because they say, well, we can't afford to measure. Well, can you afford not to? So when I had Studer Group, I had 9 employees, and I hired an outside company to do an employee engagement survey. And they said, no one at 9 employees have ever hired us to do an employee engagement survey. And I said, well, if I don't make these 9 really happy, I might not get to the next group. So I think you've got to really drill into making sure you have the right supervision, because people don't leave their boss. People don't leave their job, they leave their boss. Now, they might not say it, but they do. And then you have to look at the age of the workforce. So, for example, the number one reason that people over the age of 30 leave their job is because they don't like their boss. The reason people under 30 leave their job is they want to like their boss, but they also want to feel that they're being developed and invested in. And then your employees have to know, especially in any industry, that you care about them, that you know about them, that you're going to provide them services. So I've worked, and I think part of it, Ron, is I worked for a boss one time that I really didn't like. And you might say, well, Quint, why don't you quit? Well, you're young, you got a wife, you got kids. It's just not that easy. And on Sundays, I would just not look forward to the whole week. And Wednesday afternoon, I got a little happier because I was almost done. So I think people take their bosses and their jobs home with them. So I'm not only want to create a great place to work, I want to, like you, Ron, I know your history. I want to create great communities. And if we're great employers, then we have happy employees, then that impacts having a happier and a better quality of life in the community. So that's why I feel so strongly about this. I know what it's like to work in a place you like, and I know what it's like to work in a place you don't like.
Mm. Well, that's the reason I started a business. It's probably one of the reasons you started a business as well. That's what I find in entrepreneur for most entrepreneurs is there's a lack of purpose in their life. And oftentimes people think, well, you start a business and that's how you fill the void. And that obviously works for a lot of people, but not everyone can start a business. Some people want to work. Some people want to work for other organizations, and that's just as purposeful for them. And I think sometimes as an entrepreneur, we start that business to fill that void, but then we forget that that's now our job. It's our job to fill that void, to create purpose and meaning for everyone that's part of the organization.
Well, that's that investment in people. And I think people appreciate it. And not everybody has a DNA to be an entrepreneur. So I think what you want to do is create entrepreneurs in your company. And an entrepreneur has a lot of characteristics, but they really, really bring that. I want to make this a great company, but I don't want to have my own company, but the company I'm in, I want to make great. Now, if you want to know, again, I think I get fascinated by data. What's the difference between a satisfied employee and engaged employee? And a satisfied employee is good. They'll come to work, they'll do a nice job, but they're not as committed to the long-term success of the company. An engaged employee truly, truly is so locked into, not only do I want to do a good job, but where's the company? We have a coffee shop in Janesville, Wisconsin, and Andy, one of the managers there, drops me a text or an email, maybe email or text on Saturday to tell me that they just had their best day they've ever had. He went to compliment all the staff. And I'm thinking that's an engaged person. That's a person that not only wants to do a great job, but they're connected to the short and long-term success of the company. And I think that's the trick, or the skill, is taking that satisfied employee and helping them be an engaged employee.
I love it. And I think a lot of times, specifically in our industry, the home services world, the trades, the things that people probably don't consider business opportunities get left behind. When you think about healthcare, you think about doctors and nurses and so on, and highly educated individuals, and creating purpose behind their work seems pretty straightforward. But your world now is baseball, and there are folks cleaning those toilets every day, day in and day out. And it's very similar to the world that we operate in today. Is it possible to create the same level of purpose in a vocation for a housekeeper as it is for a doctor?
Well, I think absolutely. And I think, in fact, healthcare doesn't do that good at it sometimes too, because I think they take it for granted. It's all about us connecting the dots. And when you think of what we're doing, if somebody's taking care of a house for someone, you're making their life better. You're really reducing infections. You're doing all sorts of good work. I look at our little boutique hotel. There's a wedding there every weekend. So we're creating memories. And I think our whole goal is to connect the dots to people, to talk about, when you do this, you make people's lives better. When you don't know where they're coming from. That person could be coming into an organization because they're there to bury their father. They could be coming because they've had traumatic experience. They could be coming because they've saved for years to go somewhere. So I just think as a supervisor, you've got to be willing to connect the dots to people. So we try to do that in everything we do. But an example, we got to know, we did a thing, we hosted an event for parents that have lost a child, and it's called Rally Foundation. Cindy Bonner is very involved. They do a great organization, and they have them all over the Southeast. So They did a thing at our stadium. They just used a room. It wasn't about a ballpark for parents who have lost a child. And I get a note later and from a person who attended it, and I didn't attend it. And he just said, I want to send you this picture. My daughter loved Pensacola Blue Wahoos and she knew she was going to die. And we took her to a Wahoo game, and we just wanted to know what fun she had and the difference you guys made in her life. And here's this little girl, probably 3 years old, sitting in a seat with a little felt blue Wahoo #1 finger holding up. That's what we have to get to our people. That's what we have to get to our workforce. We have to constantly help connect the dots to the difference they make. And I think you can do that in any job, whether it's a bricklayer, whether it's a plumber, whether it's somebody cleaning rooms, somebody creating meals. And this is a healthcare story, but it clicks, I hope. In my new book, The Calling, I tell the story of I was going to speak at a hospital in Peoria, and I said, if you have any notes, any employees you'd like me to recognize, let me know. And I got a note from the leader of the OB unit, labor and delivery. And she told me that there's going to be a food service worker at my talk. And she said the young woman had lost her baby. It was a stillborn birth. She was very young, had no support network. And she was in this hospital, and she'd lost her baby. And what they do in any event is you let the family hold on to the baby. This is a mother, say goodbye, and so on. So they offered, the pastoral care offered, the nurses offered, I'm sure the doctor offered to be with this young girl with her baby. And she said, no, I'm okay. And she was in her room alone with her baby who was deceased. And the tray passer walked in, and realized what she'd walked into and said, I'm so sorry. I know you want to be alone. And the woman said, no, I don't. So this food service worker sat down on the bed with this young mother with this deceased baby and helped her. And she asked why it happened and what to tell. And the message I got was she came into work today to pass out food, and she passed out love. And don't underestimate the difference everyone makes in the hallway, in the cleaning, because you make a huge difference. And I think what happens is if we get into this, some jobs are more important than others, we're defeating the purpose, because I think everybody does noble work and everybody can make a difference. And you never want to underestimate the differences someone makes.
Oh, beautifully said. And what a story. So I love your book, and again, love your story. One of the things that sticks out to me the most, us entrepreneurs, we get real serious about our bank accounts. But in your book, you talk about a different type of a bank account and a different priority that an owner of a business or a manager of a business should have when they're depositing something into their employees' emotional bank account. Can you talk to our audience about what that means?
Yeah, I think we've probably heard it. Probably the first time I read a lot about it was Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Essential Habits of Highly Effective People. And he basically, the analogy was we have a bank account and we have an emotional bank account. And every day there's going to be deposits or withdrawals. And I think if we're not careful in the workplace, when people first get hired, they're pumped. I mean, they're excited. They wouldn't take the job, and they go through orientation, and they get to wear, clothes that says 2 maids, and they get to do all these 2 maids and a mop and the whole bit. And they're all excited, or anywhere, the Blue Wahoos or Bodacious Shops or any of those things. They're excited. Orientation, we tell them what a great place it is, and we work real hard on that. And then they come to work. And I think what happens is it takes 3 compliments to every 1 criticism, according to research. It's even more now. It's like 5, but let's just say 3 to every 1 criticism for someone to feel good about their job and the human being. 2 to 1 is neutral, and 1 to 1 is negative. So what happens is an employee comes to work, and we tend just to notice what's wrong. So I'm probably going to talk to them more about what they didn't do than what they did do. And every time I do that, if I'm not careful, I'm taking a withdrawal from their emotional bank account, and they get discouraged. So I'm not saying we shouldn't correct things that need to be corrected, but you have to ask yourself, if you're a boss and somebody saw your name pop up on their phone or their email, are they thinking, oh, what did I do wrong? What's happening now? Am I in trouble? Or are they thinking, well, this is pretty good. They probably have something positive to say. So I think, Ron, we have to be very sensitive, and I have to be sensitive because I'm one. Most entrepreneurs, most of us notice what's wrong. That's why we became an entrepreneur, to fix something that bothered us, to bring solutions. And I'm really good at noticing what's wrong. I notice every piece of paper. I notice every little thing that's not right, but I got to be really careful that I really push the positive. So with the Blue Wahoos this year, we really pushed them to be better. I brought Jesse Cole in from the Savannah Bananas to do a little workshop for us. And pretty rough about we got to get better. We got to get better. But now that the season started, I'm just constantly trying to look at what's right. Good energy last night. Good this. I'll know we fix it. So I think people have to just keep in their mind, am I going to make withdrawals in the employee's emotional bank account, or I'm going to make deposits? And because withdrawals are so emotional, it takes 3 or more positive, put more deposit into emotional bank account than taking out withdrawals.
Well, Jesse's a great friend to the Two Maids in a Mott brand. We've had him on the show actually, and I don't know if he challenged you to this, but I'm assuming he challenged you to wear a blue tux to every home game. I'm not sure.
Well, I think he was a little jealous because I'm so good looking that
That's
I actually one of my employees, DC Reeves, and I actually have a blue tux and an orange tux because for Halloween we went out as Dumb and Dumber, and so I'm there.
All right. So I don't know if you're having this issue, but us here at Two Maids in a Mop and across every industry really I can think of across America, the blue collar workforce, it has never been just a breeze to hire and to keep hired. But in 21, post lockdowns, it's become even harder than maybe ever in the 18 years that I've been a part of this organization. What are in your book? You talk about some creative things that any organization can do to hire. What are you seeing across the landscape now, and are there ways to combat the issues that we're all facing right now?
Well, I think anytime, I've been around long enough, and I'm gonna now help me. Let me explain. High performer people can transfer learnings. Middle performers have to have it transferred for them. Low performers probably aren't listening to your show anyway because they don't think it's their problem. So I'm going to use a couple examples from my past, and I think it can relate, and I'll try to do that in a minute. Being in healthcare, we've gone through horrendous shortages at times. Physical therapy in the 1990s, you couldn't get a physical therapist. A physical therapist could almost go on vacation, stop at the local hospital and work that afternoon if they wanted to. Nursing shortages, gone through her big nursing shortages. Well, in both examples, we had to be very creative. And it's hard for people to be creative because they worry, and I can understand that. So, for example, in physical therapy, and you got to realize your competitor is going to copy you very quickly. You got into things like signing bonuses and all sorts of things. In nursing, it got to be where if you work 72 hours, you could get paid for 80, or tuition reimbursement and things like that. So I think the first thing is with flexibility. We, for example, because of insurance and things like that, we're really much at first trying to keep our workforce under 30 hours, and you might go through that too. We've sort of taken that monitoring system off right now. And if we have to increase our healthcare benefits because we're working people more hours, that's certainly better than having less hours that we're running and so on. I also believe this is the time when you know whether you had good culture or not, because it's, again, going through healthcare when there was 5-6 years ago in healthcare, there was a maybe 10 years ago at the financial meltdown, there were no jobs. So people stuck in organizations, and people started thinking, well, look at our turnover is so low. We must be a real good culture. But they didn't measure employee engagement or culture. And then all of a sudden when it changes, your people move. So now is a good indication of, do we have the right culture? So I would say, first of all, make sure you're measuring what you got right now. And don't fall into the trap of rationalizing, well, the reason we don't have anyone here is because nobody wants to work, or they're paying this. Your more loyal employees that you've really garnered over the years will stick with you. But also, I think the other thing is we've just got to sometimes be a little more creative, whether it's compensation, whether it's benefits, whether it's fun. And where we benefit the most is training. We find that people want to be trained, they want to be developed, and they really appreciate that investment. So I don't have any answer, except sometimes you got to do stuff you never thought you'd be doing, because the other option is even worse, which is closing doors and or so on. And sometimes you have to do that. I mean, you have to shrink your business, because what you don't want to do is have poor quality. And that, I know for every entrepreneur, it just hurts, because who wants to turn away business? But you're better off turning away some business and making sure you keep the ones you have by not letting your quality suffer.
I look at recruiting employees very similar to generating leads for your business. When the phones aren't ringing, a good entrepreneur gets on his hustle hat and figures out a way to get the phones to ring. Sometimes that means larger investment. Sometimes that means a different investment. Sometimes that means putting on a yellow tux like Jesse does and doing something crazy to get people in the stands. But when it comes to employees and recruiting, I hear so many people, like you said, fall in the trap of just complaining, whether it's complaining about federal, money, benefits, or complaining about the industry and how no one wants to work. The hustle hat, for some reason, doesn't move on the employee side as easy as it does on the customer side. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson here. Like you said, there's no reason to give practical tips, because it's more than the actual idea. It's the mindset that it's your job as the leader of that organization to figure out a way for employees to do their job, so that you can create an experience for customers. That's the reason you exist as a business.
And also fish where the fish are, and I think Jesse, it's really not his yellow tuxedo. That's sort of become his image. But if he wore a yellow tuxedo and his employees were unhappy, or his customers weren't getting great care, that yellow tuxedo wouldn't mean much. And I think we have to sometimes not think there's a gimmick, because there's a real substance under everything Jesse does. As you can tell, I'm a fan of his. But going back to this, I was talking to a restaurateur the other day who was short of help. Well, I run a baseball team. We have 120 food service workers. They work nights during games, and they work every other week almost. And I said to her, why don't you come to the ballpark and I'll introduce you to 120 food service workers, and why don't you tell them they should come work at your restaurant? And I said, now, some of them might already work at a restaurant, but some might not. So think about where the people are. I mean, again, when I built my company, if I saw a good employee somewhere else, I would sort of ask them, and I wouldn't recruit them right there on the spot, but I make sure, how happy are you, and have you thought of this? And if you're ever interested, because we see the talent that's out there, and then you have to create that in place. Bert Thornton's a good friend of mine, and he was the head of Waffle House for years, and he wrote Bert's Chili comes from him. And you ever look at a Waffle House, they retain their workforce, and they do it with some creative pieces where they get credit, phantom stock. They get some benefits. And so I just think sometimes we get too stuck on, well, we can't do that. But why not? And I think the whole key is you got to make sure you have great supervisors, because that's the make or break is your managers, because that's who the employees. And you have to be careful you train your supervisors, Ron, because what happens sometimes is you don't realize how they're positioning you if you're the owner. So if you make a decision and they go back to the workforce and say, well, I would have given you these hours, but you know how ownership is, or I suggested this, but you know how ownership is, or I know you need new equipment, but you know how ownership is. Well, they'll like their boss, but they're not going to like their ownership. And that's why I think you've got to have two avenues. You have to have an avenue where you train your managers, but an avenue where you go right to your employees on a regular basis. We survey our employees every 90 days to make sure, do you have the equipment you need? Are you feeling recognized? Are you getting feedback you need? Because it's an open book test. And all the supervisors have to say is, well, gee, if I give them feedback, reward and recognition, they have tools and equipment, they know what's going on. So I think it's creating that double loop feedback system that's vital in any company. And again, the thing I see, Ron, all the time is people that are small say, I want to do all those things, but I want to wait till I'm bigger. Well, the problem is you don't get bigger if you don't do those things.
Yeah, I can attest to that. It took us, you probably don't know about our early days there in Pensacola. Listeners to the show has heard this, so I won't bore them with the same story, but it took us a couple of years to even figure out how to make a dollar bill. It was tough going those early years. Our first year in business, we generated just over $100,000 in revenue. So it wasn't the grandest of grand openings, to say the least. And, I felt sorry for myself often during those early days. And I also wanted to be big right away. But all the things that we went through, even though they were somewhat painful during the moment, they were true blessing in disguises, because every experience was used to build upon another one later on and later on. And eventually we did get to realize the dream that we're still building on today. So I'm with you. To grow big, you got to start small at some point, and all those small moments are going to be positive experiences for you later on.
But you don't want to use, and I agree with you around 100%, you don't want to use the fact that I'm small not to do some things. For example, hiring. Make sure your current workforce is involved in hiring their coworkers, because they will be much stricter on who to hire. And if they turn someone down, they're going to be less complaining about working short, because they're the ones that turn someone down. Training. My Studer Community Institute, it's a not-for-profit. We offer very inexpensive online training for people. And I'll have people just not invest $39 or $49 on providing a manager some skill set, because they just don't know if they can afford it. And I just sometimes say, can you afford not to? What's a bad hire? What's an investment? So I think what small companies, and that's what we've tried to do here in Pensacola, is really offer very inexpensive ways to invest in your managers, because that's the lubricant of any organization. It's what's between the owner and the employees. And it's like, people, if they look at football, Patrick Mahomes, who didn't have a great Super Bowl and lost to, I think, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the difference between those two, the quarterbacks, Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, was the offensive line. Tampa gave Tom Brady time to throw. The Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes didn't have it. And of course, now they built their offensive line. Our offensive line in small business or any business is the managers. So how well are we investing and developing in our middle management group?
Man, that's something that I even need to hear. As we grow as a franchise brand, we so often think about our frontline workers, the actual house cleaners, and obviously there's somebody in between the owner and those cleaners, and it's always a manager. And I listening to you talk, sometimes I wonder if we do take that for granted, because the majority of our workforce is very, very on, inside a home cleaning a house. And so that's what we tend to focus on the most. But that's good information for me. All right. So I got a couple of easy questions for you, but they're kind of off, on the spot questions. So hopefully you can handle it. I bet you can, but they're fun as we're kind of winding down here. I love stories. I love stories about organizations and business leaders that have created truly remarkable employee and customer experiences. So I want to put you on the spot, and we'll start with employees. If you can go back to whether it's the baseball days, to your consulting days, to somewhere inside of a hospital, what's the single best, or at least one of the best employee experience stories you can share with us today?
I think one of the things is the fact that employee has cancer, and she had won Employee of the Month award, and her husband writes a note that says she had never felt more cared about in her workforce ever. And her managers and her coworkers go to her funeral, and there in the casket, right over her shoulder, was her Employee of the Month plaque. And I think we underestimate those types of things. And similar example, not just to talk about death, but family went to the person's wake, and they're on his lapel. This gentleman who had passed away was Employee of the Month pin. So I think we miss things. Cards. I'm a big believer you write handwritten thank you notes to your employees, and you have your managers feed you the information, then the manager gets the credit. And I will tell you story after story of these cards showing at you know, baby showers. The mother-in-law was showing everyone the note she got from her the daughter had because she had seen it. Just wonderful stories about touching people's lives. And I think bosses and people underestimate. I ask employees all the time, have you ever gotten a note from your boss or the owner? And they say yes. And I say, tell me, when do you throw it out? And the number one answer is never. And I think we just underestimate those types of things. The other thing I have found to be very helpful, Ron, I learned this years ago. I was looking at a radiology department that had very low turnover. And again, I'm not saying this is silver bullet if you don't do other things, but she said, well, I always send birthday cards to the employees' kids, and they just seem to appreciate it. So ever since 2000, anybody that works for us gets a birthday card. Their children get a birthday card for my wife and I. And, we add a little to it. We throw $25 in cash. So every child up until they're like 18 gets a birthday card from us with $25 cash. And I think that is a huge impact. I remember one time one of my employees jokingly was at dinner saying she'd made a mistake and she hoped she didn't get fired. And her kid said, what? And the whole kid was worried he was going to lose his $25 revenue stream for his birth. So I think we can't underestimate letting people know we care about them, letting people know we think about them. And I think those are just two very inexpensive things but we have a system in place. So we don't leave it up for, we have managers and they're required to send to me on a certain basis a name of employee. Why should they get a thank you note from me and their home address? So Ron, if you sent me one, for example, on somebody, I would then basically say, Jeremy, I got an email from Ron. Ron was complimenting how you went into an area you weren't supposed to work. You had the day off, but we really needed you. You came in and you worked and you cleaned it. You did such a great job. We got such good feedback. Thank you so much for what you do. Not only will he like me, the owner, but he's going to love his boss, Ron. So I think you have to set up systems in place because, as we said, if it takes 3 compliments to 1 criticism grows naturally. It's like weeds. Compliments need to be gardened and fertilized. So we've got to create systems in place to grow the positive, because the criticism, we don't have to, it comes naturally. And so I think you have to hardwire systems in place to find out what's going right and then maximize it.
Oh man, you should put those words on a frame somewhere. Those were gold. I feel bad even asking this last question because that one was so phenomenal. But I just got to hear one more story. So we talked about employee engagement, employee performance, and just now employee experience and some of the stories behind it. On the flip side, there's always a fun engagement with customers that comes with a great employee experience. And so whether it's some kooky things around the ballpark or some creative, unique things inside a hospital, what's one customer experience story that stands out from your history?
Well, I think you always want to, with I don't know, I think with customer experience, you just always want to do something above and beyond what anybody will expect. So we just had one at this opening day. I got a note from a woman, and her father always came to Blue Wahoo games, and he passed away. And she said, I got his season tickets, but I'm afraid of COVID. Is there any way that we could not use the tickets this year, but still save our tickets for next year? And I will tell you, most places would have said, well, you can, but we can't promise you these. And we said, absolutely. We'll put them in. We'll save them for the whole year. We'll let other people use them. Of course, we'll sell them like they were available. But for next year, you can have these two tickets. But we'd love to honor your father. Would you be okay if before the opening day, we did a silent prayer for your father and then did something on the video board because he was such a wonderful fan? And she said that'd be wonderful. But I'm a little afraid of COVID. I don't want to sit in his seats because they were so close to everything. And so we got her and her husband 2 seats farther down the line. And, about the 3rd or 4th inning, Anna, who's in merchandise, brought him a bag of gifts from us. And I just talked to them, and she looked at me and she said, I want you to know that our father lived we believe, 5 extra years because he so enjoyed coming to these games. So it's those things they didn't expect. They were just wondering if they could move their tickets along, and we ended up doing a night of honoring her father. And those are the types of things you do.
Right. And you know what's so great about that story? The largest investment that you gave was your time. Very, very little of that was monetary. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught up. People want to throw money at so many problems. And obviously sometimes that's needed. But in your case there, you made a dream come true for multiple people, and most of the investment was just your personal time. So.
The other thing, Ron, is really teach service recovery. And listen, when you run a baseball game, you get drop balls. Opening day, you get food lines, video board issues. And we really, really do a lot on service recovery. Don't get defensive, fix it right away, say, what more can I do? And ironically, you get these nice notes back thanking you for great service recovery. And so I think you also have to really train your managers and your staff to fix things on the spot right away. And service recovery is a key. And I think many, many businesses, especially the closer you get to the customer, they get afraid to make exceptions. And sometimes you just do, and it works.
Well, Quint, I am truly honored to have the chance to talk to you today. It's always fun hearing, someone else who's already walked the path that other entrepreneurs are trying to create themselves. I just want to say congratulations on just living a life of purpose. That's what everyone's goal should be in life, is when they look back on it, be able to see meaning and purpose behind it. And you have done that, and you've created opportunities, countless opportunities for people around you, not just there in the Pensacola area, but across the country. So congratulations. And again, it's a true honor. I'd love for anyone listening to our interview today to have a chance to work with you, attend one of these symposiums, read one of your books, whatever it takes to engage and connect with you. What can folks do to connect with you?
Oh, the best way is, I do it. I give it all the time at every baseball game, everywhere. It's Quint at quintstuder.com. And then my phone number is 850-232-4648. That goes on the video board every game, because we tell people we don't want them to leave without a great fan experience. So either write me or call me and we'll fix it.
There you go. You can't beat that. Well, Quint, again, thank you for your time today. I look forward to watching a Wahoos game here in the near future.
Well, hey, Ron, vice versa. I mean, I admire what you've done. You've far exceeded anything I've ever done when you look at the awards that you've gotten over the years. And you did it the right way, too. You did it by improving the quality of life for your workforce, the quality of life for your franchisees, and the quality of life for people that use your services. So the one thing you and I won't agree on is who should be thanking who.
Oh, well, that means a lot, Quint. Well, I will say thank you again. I'm honored to talk to you. And again, we'll do this again down the road.
Well, thank you very much.
Kyle Davis here from Business Development. Thank you so much for listening to the Cleaning Up Podcast. If you found this episode valuable, then please subscribe on your favorite listening platform, and please share it with your friends. If you're ever interested in going into business for yourself and purchasing a franchise, then don't hesitate to reach out. You can get a hold of me at phone number 205-870-8643, email kyld@ineedamade.com, or visit us online at twomatesfranchise.com to learn more.